Hi everyone, this is Katie Armstrong, and this is the second part of my behavior presentation. I had to break it up into two sections. So first I recorded the introductory portion where I described what behaviors are. Then now I'm going to jump into some strategies. So I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. Okay, you should now see my screen. And this was just my welcome slide. So this was the behavior in young children with visual impairments. And again, my name is Katie Armstrong. I am a teacher of the visually impaired and orientation and mobility specialist. Like I said in the initial recording, the initial video, that I am not a behavior specialist. I just have found some passion in working with children who happen to have some more challenging behaviors and have experienced a lot in my class. So I'm just going to kind of brush past the slides that I've already done and get to the strategies. I am going to stop and review a couple of things along the way, just so we jump into the strategies on the same page. So first, I'm going to this is the slide that talks about the ABCs of behavior, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence, and how critical it is. And I know I said this a bunch in the original recording, and you're going to hear it from me again in this session. It's critical that we take the time to find out what the antecedent is, what happened before the behavior occurred. It could be referred to as a trigger. What was it that happened right before the behavior? Then what is the behavior? What did the child do? What was the actionable, observable, measurable behavior? And then what was the consequence? So what happened directly afterwards? And I don't think I touched on this very much the other day, but a consequence truly can be positive or negative. It can be a desirable outcome. So a consequence for good behavior is a hug, or a high five, or a way to go, something like that. That's a consequence. That's what happened directly following the desirable behavior. A consequence that's less desirable would be getting in trouble or getting hurt. That's a consequence. If I climb up on the bookshelf and I fall, I'm going to get hurt. That's a consequence for a behavior. So I'm going to keep integrating these things as I go into the strategies, and hope that through repetition and through additional examples, it'll become kind of routine or second nature to think of things in this manner. The other thing that I wanted to review before I went into the strategies, because again, I'm going to continue to pull this into the strategies and in my examples, is the 4 functions of behavior. So all of our behavior, I've said, is communication, where the child is communicating something. They're trying to tell us something. They like something, they don't like something, they want more of something. It could be, the communicative intent could be truly anything, but there's a purpose. They're trying to tell you that they want attention. They're trying to tell you they want to get away from something. They're trying to tell you they want access to a tangible. They want to obtain something, or that they truly have a sensory need. There is something sensory that they are needing at that time. So I'm going to continue to embed these 4 purposes or functions of behaviors into my strategies as well. Okay. All right, so my teaching strategies. I just have 2 slides of teaching strategies. I don't have a lot in regards to teaching strategies, but I'm going to take time to give you some examples as I go. The very first and most important key point is to start small. I was thinking about this point. I mentioned it the other day in the original recording, part 1 of my behavior presentation, and I got to reiterate it because this is the most important thing that you can do. You'll drive yourself crazy if you try to identify every single behavior that your child has and you try to work on them all at the same time. You're going to feel as if you're failing. And you don't want to do that to yourself or your child. You've got to start small. An example that I thought of was just me managing behaviors in a whole class. So I have a classroom of 8 students, and as you can imagine, 3 to 5-year-olds who have visual impairments along with additional disabilities. Think of your child and the more challenging, undesirable behaviors you experience. All children have those to some extent or another. They might be small and minimal, or they might be bigger and more obvious and more noticeable behaviors, but they all have undesirable behaviors, and that can be very difficult to manage. So when I sit down to a large group activity, such as circle time, I notice and I see, and if you were to watch my circle time, you would see a wide variety of undesirable behaviors. But as a teacher, I have to start small. I have to find the most disruptive behavior in that setting, in that activity, and I'll focus on that. And I will intentionally try to reduce that, so that way things go a little bit smoother. And then I'll keep picking and choosing the behaviors within that activity that I'm going to address and pay attention to. And I encourage you to do the same thing. In the part 1 of my behavior presentation, I said, talk to your family, talk to your early intervention providers or the case managers or any of the teachers, whoever it is that's working with you and your child. Talk to them, brainstorm with them, and prioritize and choose something. Choose one routine or one activity and one behavior within that, and start there and find success there, and then build out and expand out. And maybe you stick with the same behavior in more activities and in more environments, and you found out what works, and then build from there. But do not try to take on the whole mountain, especially right now. Right now, as I'm recording this, we are in a pandemic. Many of us are working from home. We have all of our children at home that we're trying to help with schooling. If your child with a visual impairment isn't your only child, there's so much on our plates right now. And like our lives weren't busy enough to begin with, so just be gentle on yourself and start small. Do not try to tackle everything at once. Just start small. So second, my number one teaching strategy, second of my number one teaching strategies would be take time to truly analyze and determine the function of the behavior. And I say that because I have many times assumed I knew what the purpose or intention was behind a behavior, and I found out the hard way, and after a long and not pleasurable experience and exhausting teaching experience over time, that I was wrong. Not escape. My example there is my little girl who I mentioned the other day in the first part of my presentation. She loves me. She loves me dearly. She loves me so much. She never wants our activities to end. And what she was doing was starting to throw her materials before they ended. And I assumed, like I told you the other day, that the function was escape, that she didn't want to do these things. And I was getting frustrated because I tried all of the strategies that I knew for managing escape, because that's what I thought I was looking at, and I was just failing, and it wasn't working, and it wasn't working, and it wasn't working. And one day I just kind of sat back, and I realized that what the problem was that she wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to gain my attention. She didn't want our time together to end. And so I had to reapproach it in terms of attention, and that she was looking for attention. And then I was able to be successful. But I actually had to get very creative in how I addressed it, because I had created a routine around this negative attention-seeking behavior. So I actually had to take the routine that was the hardest for us, our one-to-one work time. I had to take that out of her schedule altogether. For about 2 months, I had to just say, we aren't having this time. And I would work with every other student, and not as a punishment. It wasn't a punishment. It may have felt like it to her, but it wasn't a punishment. I would play with her intentionally during other activities and routines. But the purpose was to pull that out of her routine. The seeking of negative attention within our one-to-one time had become routine for her. And I was having a hard time, even though I knew the true intent or the true purpose, because it had become routine, I was having a hard time changing it or shifting it. So I had to take it out. And then I was able to re-implement that activity and routine after a couple months when it was no longer part of her repertoire. So keep that in mind. Sometimes part of the solution is to take away the opportunity for the behavior to occur. And I think I have some more examples for that as I go. When teaching, number 3 here, bullet point number 3 is when teaching a new behavior, forget your agenda. So what I mean when I say forget your agenda is that when you're teaching a new behavior, you're actively teaching a replacement behavior for the one that's undesirable, and you're teaching a new way to communicate and obtain the same thing. So remember, we're looking at our antecedent, our behavior, and our consequence. So the antecedent, again, is the thing that happens right before. The behavior is that actionable, measurable, observable thing that they are doing, their actions, and then the consequence is what happens directly afterwards. So that behavior, the B in ABCs, is a communicative intent. It's a way that they're communicating to obtain whatever it is they want. Usually it's whatever that consequence is. They're obtaining this thing that turns out to be our consequence. And so sometimes we have to shift our mindset and change our agenda and know that we're focusing. So big picture, from the example I used the other day of my student who I wanted sitting at the table. Big picture, my agenda was that I wanted her sitting at the table for an extended period of time to work on fine motor tasks or any other goal-specific things that need to happen. Children need to be able to sit at a table to do things, especially as they go on in school. All right, so big picture was her sitting at the table. So that's my agenda. But I can't start with that level of an agenda. So I have to start small. Give up big picture for now and start small, because then I can build on it. Another example of when teaching a new behavior, forget your agenda. This same little girl who I was teaching to sit at a table, she would go to circle time, which was not her favorite activity. It was not all that meaningful for her. She has a dual sensory impairment. It's not that meaningful for her. So she would come and she would sit down and she would do what I called a chair dive. I describe it as a chair dive. And when she decided she was finished, she would just try to dive out of the chair. So the antecedent was, in most cases, it was a song that she liked was done. So the song that she liked was finished. The song was finished. Her behavior was her diving out of the chair, and the consequence was she got to leave circle time. So she obtained her purpose. She wanted to escape. Her purpose was to escape, to get out of circle time. She was finished. She didn't want to be there any longer, so she wanted to escape that activity. Her behavior, the way that she was communicating that was by diving out of her chair. All right, so what I needed to do was shape that behavior. Forget my big picture of her wanting to sit in her chair. I had to shape the behavior to meet her agenda and teach her another way to communicate the same thing and obtain the same thing. So I had to step back and watch. As soon as her song that I knew she liked, so every single time the song ended, she was trying to dive out of her chair, which was not safe. I would say, "Are you finished?" And she would take my hands, kind of sign finished, and I'd say, "Okay, go play." And so she never had the opportunity to dive out of her chair, but I had to change my agenda for her. I couldn't expect her to sit there any longer. I had to teach her replacement behavior, adjust my agenda, and then I'll be able to build from there. I'll probably have some more examples as I go that will reflect on adjusting your agenda, because it's a lot of what I do. Actually, the next example that I have for make it a routine is the same thing of adjusting my agenda. So make it routine, and I'm going to talk in a couple weeks. I'm going to talk again on routines specifically, because routines are critical for our students, not just for managing behavior, but building on communication, anticipation, feeling safe, being willing and ready to explore. There's a lot of benefits from routines, whether that's the day. A routine could be a full day, or it could be just a small snippet. It could be a 5-minute window of how the steps and how you accomplish something. But I'm going to go into that further. But in regards to managing behaviors, if it's routine, it's predictable. When it's predictable, your child knows what to expect. Some of our children, some of their behaviors, their undesirable behaviors that they exhibit are because they're startled or they're scared or they don't know what's happening. And so establishing and creating a routine can help them anticipate and know what's going to happen. And then you guys build communication that they can anticipate, that they understand what you're telling them. So my example was make him happy, which I shared in the first part of the behavior session. Was make him happy, and it was about my little boy who started school and he would just cry all the time. He cried and he wanted to be held, and my whole goal in life was to make him happy. My agenda, my true agenda, was to have him fit into what the rest of the class was doing, because as a teacher, that's the thing that's going to be the easiest for me. But to get to my big agenda, my big picture, I had to start small. I had to meet him where he was, and I had to create a routine for him so he felt safe. Once he had his routine and he felt safe and he trusted me and the other adults in the classroom, I could start integrating him into the classroom routine. So that's an example of like a small routine. Then another example would be that same little girl who's diving out of her chair and who I was having a hard time getting to sit to do any work at a table. We also had a time during the day where she has to sit to do water. She can't run around to do her water because she'll throw it up, and it's hard. And it's G-tube. It's a G-tube water experience, not drinking from a cup. And I needed her to sit. And what can happen at school and what can happen at home are two different things due to just the nature of the way classrooms run. We have to find alternate ways to do things, and sometimes it's not what a child is used to or familiar with. And so we needed to get her to sit at a table to get her water, and it was different than what she does at home, and she didn't want to do it. And so I had to create a small routine around sitting for water so that she would tolerate it. It took me a while to teach that routine, so it took us a while for her to decide that this was an okay thing. But once it was routine, and we did it the exact same way every single day, she was able to fall in and understand what was happening. So we always gave her a signal that it was time to go get water, that we were going to go sit down at the table. She knows her routine so well now. She sees that symbol and she throws it because she's like, I don't want to. She will come over and tolerate it and do it, but she's like, I don't want to do that. But then she sits at the table and we start her water, and she kind of helps with a syringe. And then when she's finished, she has to sit there so she doesn't just throw up her water. So then she plays with a toy. But we created a routine that now helped. If we did it different every single time, we would probably fight her every single day trying to give her water. So making routines, even no matter how small they are, that it's consistent. They usually don't feel like they work at first, because the child doesn't understand it yet. It takes time to build that understanding, so don't give up when you do establish a routine. Routines naturally lead into calendar systems. So a calendar system, and that's its own topic as well. I'm not going to get into this elaborate calendar system, but essentially it's helping your child plan their day. And the very first step for a calendar system is just object recognition and pairing it with an activity. So if your child isn't a huge fan of getting their diaper changed, maybe they have a difficult time every time you lay them down to change their diaper. There could be a lot of reasons. If you really analyze their behavior, the antecedent, their behavior, and the consequence, there could be a wide variety of reasons why they don't like getting their diaper changed. And sometimes it's because they're not quite sure what's about to happen. Maybe you say you're going to change their diaper, but they don't understand those words, or maybe you say it different every single time. I don't know. I'm not there. I can't analyze the situation. But using a calendar system would mean that every single time you're going to go change their diaper, you show them a diaper, you say, we're going to go change your diaper, and you go and do that. And using that real item is the first piece of a calendar system. Once you teach your child a symbol for, say, 3 activities, diaper change, mealtime, whether it's a spoon or a G-tube, a syringe, and then play. Maybe there's one toy that they really like, or they like to play on the floor, and you always give them this toy when they lay on the floor. You could create like a 2 or 3 part. First, we're going to change our diaper, and then we're going to do water. That, again, is its own topic. And if I was going to say anything, I would say make sure you just start by giving a tangible, a real item to represent an activity to help with transitioning. And that would be the start to a calendar system. Beat them to the punch. So this is, when I say beat them to the punch, what I really mean is teach the replacement behavior. So teach what it is that you want to see, how you would prefer they communicate to obtain whatever it is they need. What we have to remember is that the behavior is a communicative intent. They're communicating something with us. We have to provide them a new way to communicate to obtain the same goal. So if they're trying to communicate that they're done and they're trying to get out, like my chair diver, her communicative intent by diving out of her chair was that she was finished. Her purpose was to get out of that activity. She was over it. She was done. She had experienced the part that was important to her, and she wanted to go. And so, but diving out of the chair is not safe. So I needed to beat her to the punch. I had to anticipate her point right just before she was going to get frustrated, show her another way to communicate, in which I did was I taught her to say she was finished and let her go and have her and obtain that same purpose. And then because I taught her the safer way to communicate, I gave her power. I gave her power of her words and power of her life and power of her day and part of her power over that activity. And I was able to shape it to where she stayed a little bit longer. I was able to say, oh, one more, and then you're finished. And she's like, oh, okay. And she knows now to take my hand, sign that she's finished, and I will let her leave, or I'll tell her, hold on, you gotta wait, one more. And we were able to do that, but I had to beat her to the punch. I had to actively and intentionally reteach the communication. So now she had a new way to communicate for the same thing. Another example for that, especially if you have a young child who, I'll give another example so that it's really concrete. I was thinking about a little guy who is a good eater. He likes to eat. He likes to sit at the table. He's a little bit picky, but in the grand scheme of things, he sits and he eats finger foods at the table, but he also likes to yell. And so we were sitting at the table, and if I showed him the container for goldfish or the container for cheese balls, something he really wanted, and if he saw it, if it got in his line of sight, his significantly reduced line of sight, if he saw it, he would just start yelling. He had no other way of telling me, even though he has some words, he didn't have another way that he could just pull from right away to say that he wanted those goldfish. So he would just start yelling. So I had to be very intentional to teach a new behavior. So this one, when we think about yelling for goldfish, the antecedent would be that he saw the goldfish container, or he heard me talking about goldfish, because maybe he heard me talking to another student about goldfish. He experienced that there was goldfish around that he did not yet have, okay? That would be the antecedent. The behavior is yelling. I don't like yelling in my classroom. It's very loud. It's very disruptive. Yelling. And then the consequence would be that he yells and he gets goldfish, right? That's how he communicated to me that he wanted goldfish. And there's probably a lot of opportunities that he yells and he gets what it is that he yells for. So it's a tangible. His purpose was to obtain something. He was yelling because he wanted something, and he had no other way to communicate it besides yelling. So what I'm going to do in this situation is I'm going to beat him to the punch. I'm going to beat him to the punch. So I know that he's going to yell when he sees goldfish. So as soon as I pull goldfish out, I'm going to say, hey, would you like some goldfish? And he'll probably perk up or something to indicate, yeah, I want goldfish. And I'm going to give him some goldfish. I'm going to like one or two, right? Because I'm teaching a new way to communicate. So I've got to give him lots of opportunities to practice. He's going to eat his 2 goldfish, and he's going to be a happy camper, and his plate is going to be empty. And before he even has an opportunity to yell that his plate is empty, I'm going to say, hey, your plate's empty. Would you like more goldfish? And he's going to give me some indication. He's going to touch his plate. He's going to vocalize. He's going to smile. He's going to look at me, something to tell me he wants more goldfish. And I'm like, fantastic. Here you go. Here's 2 or 3 more goldfish. And so then I'm going to sit there. I'm going to watch. I have to be observant. I have to be on top of my game because I am beating him to the punch. I'm teaching a replacement behavior. And I'm going to sit there and I'm going to wait and I'm going to watch until those goldfish are gone. And I'm not going to let him yell. I'm going to say, hey, your goldfish are gone. Would you like some more? And I'm going to do this every day for like 2 or 3 days. And eventually I'm going to push him a little further. I'm going to have him say things like, want goldfish? Or I'm going to have him sign more, or whatever it is he can give me. I'll catch him. I'll say, hey, your goldfish are almost gone. Would you like some more? And then I'm going to wait. And I might help him sign more. I might model goldfish or ga, or whatever is appropriate, touching a picture symbol, touching the container, anything that's appropriate for the child. And then I'm going to give him the goldfish. And eventually he's going to learn a new way to communicate in that setting, which is something I can use. Chances are I can use it in other settings when he wants something else. So that's what I call beating them to the punch, being observant of behaviors and catching them before they have to request in the only way they know how. And that's powerful. That's powerful, and it's something that can be done quickly and early on. And again, just starting small, finding one routine where you know you can do this, where you know every single time this happens, he's going to act this way. That's the one to start on because you know it. You can anticipate it. You know it's going to happen. You probably dread it. Okay. Offer choices. This is the ultimate go-to if you have a child that's that likes to have a lot of control, that they want what they want and they want it right now. Give them a sense of control by offering choices. Always, you have to always be okay with both choices. So if you say, do you want to go to the park or get in the bathtub? If they choose park, you better be willing to take them to the park. So I've become the professional at bad choices. I always make sure I have one good choice, the better choice, the one that I want them to do, and then a really crummy choice, something terrible. Like, why would they even want to do that? But I'm okay if they choose it. I let them do it if they choose, and then I come back later and I offer the same two choices. An example might be, and I'm trying to think, the kids that I need to offer choices to are, one, if choice making is just always great when we're building communication, so kids start to understand that they have power and control. And then the kids that are just determined, they always want what they want. This gives them that sense of control. So if you say, hey, it's time for a bath, and they're like, no, I don't want a bath. And you're like, I know you love the bath. Like, why are you throwing, why? It wasn't their idea. Like, the bath isn't cool anymore. And so you might say, hey, do you want to take a bath first? Or do you want to play with your toys first? You don't care which one they do, right? Maybe you always play with toys after the bath. It doesn't matter. Which one do you want to do? Oh, we want to play with toys. Okay, we'll do toys first and then we'll take the bath. Or do you want to get in the bath or do you want to just sit here? That's kind of one of my go-tos. Well, you can just sit here. That's cool. Like, I mean, if that's really what you want to do. But we're just sitting there. So giving choices and making sure you can follow through on both of them. Okay, so teach the desired behavior. I've touched on this multiple times, but that's really that piece with the ABCs: your antecedent, your behavior, and your consequence. You've figured out what the purpose is. You're figuring out what it is they want, and you're going to jump in at that antecedent point, what's happening right before, and catch them before they administer the behavior. The example I have here is weight. And this was a safety one, and I've used it a couple of times with a couple of different students. But I had Angel that loves to play on the stairs. She loves it. She loves it. We have these play stairs in the gym, and she just loves to play on the stairs. But she is not safe on the stairs. Not safe at all. And so I had a couple of choices. I could either teach her to be safe on the stairs, or I could block the stairs. I'm a strong believer in teaching the desirable behavior rather than avoiding situations, especially when it's safety. I'd rather teach a child to be safe than keep them from being safe. I'd rather give them an opportunity for self-control rather than making it so that they don't have to make that choice or have that self-control. So stairs is one of those things, and we always have enough staff. So what I did was I taught her that every single time we went up the stairs, she had to stop at the bottom and wait. And I did that by, so the antecedent was she saw the stairs. She knew they were there. She wanted to go up them. The behavior was she would just go up the stairs, but she wasn't safe. She would fall going up. She would fall going down. It was all bad. It's not safe. And the consequence was that she could have gotten hurt, right? Really, that was the consequence of the problem with this behavior. The behavior of going up and down the stairs is not a problem. The problem is the fact the consequence was negative. The consequence was she was going to get hurt. And so I needed to replace the behavior. I needed to create a new antecedent, I guess is probably the better way to put it. But I had to add in a step. Before she went up the stairs, I had to teach her to wait. And so what I would do is say, oh, you want to go on the stairs? Fantastic. And I would tell her, have her stay at the bottom. I'd say, wait. Then I'd say, okay, go up. And then at the top, I'd make her wait just for a second, especially when you're first teaching it. Okay, come down. And I'd do that with her over and over and over. And eventually I was able to say, wait. And I could take longer. And then I'd say, okay, go up. And then at the top, I do the same thing. All right, wait. And I can wait a little bit longer. And I tell her, okay, come down. So she's got that cue. She knows I'm there. She knows I'm ready for her to go up and come down. So I knew she could be safe. And now if I see her get to the stairs at the playground, for instance, where the space is much bigger, I can yell over to her, wait, I'm coming. And she has the self-control now to wait long enough for me to get there before she goes up the stairs. So I taught the desirable behavior of waiting before just plowing up the stairs. It's the same as the example that I gave in the first half of the presentation in the parking lot, that I wanted my son to hold my hand in the parking lot. It's not safe to run through the parking lot, and I'm not going to chase you. And so I would tell him, you hold my hand or I have to carry you. So the behavior that I'm wanting is holding my hand in the parking lot so he can be safe, consequence of safety. He didn't want that. And so, but I would, every single time when he didn't, I would just pick him up and we'll try again next time. And eventually, after just a couple times, he was holding my hand in the parking lot. And so we can do that with a wide variety of things. And again, I've touched on teaching, I think almost every example, every strategy has touched on teaching the desirable behavior, teaching the desired way to communicate, or replacement behavior. So the next point would be reinforce good behavior with specific praise and positive reinforcement. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to the things you do want them to do. So especially if you have a child that when you've analyzed your ABCs and that purpose is attention seeking, these kids really need you to pay a lot of attention to the things they're doing well, the things that you want them to do again. But you can't just say good job. Our children are visually impaired, and good job doesn't mean a lot. They might know that you're excited, but they may not know what you're excited about. So you need to be very specific. Oh, I love how you're sitting. Or the example I used the other day about a still body or being calm. Oh, your body's calm. I can feel that it's still. Thank you so much. I love that your body's so still. Or I love how you ask so nice, especially when you're teaching a new behavior. When you're teaching a new behavior, when you can praise every time that they've done it, especially when you see it in other settings, it makes them want to do it again because they want that good attention. My little girl that I've described a couple of times, that who was throwing the materials during work time, she was attention seeking. She wanted my attention. I had another opportunity with the same student, and she was demonstrating a lot of undesirable behaviors at circle time. Like if I would have counted it up, she was probably demonstrating some pretty significant undesirable behaviors for 15, probably over that, probably more than 20 instances within 15 to 30 minute circle time. And some of those behaviors were things like hitting or grabbing her friends who had more significant impairments and really couldn't defend themselves, or throwing things, usually at me, anything that was getting attention. And so I had to sit back, and I wasn't figuring out the problem, and I couldn't figure out the solution. And so I recorded it. This is a really great way and a powerful way to analyze the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence, especially if you can have an opportunity to record it. So I set up my iPad on video, so it was recording her. It couldn't see me, we were in circle time, but it was recording her, and it was recording my teaching assistant that was there supporting her, trying to protect her peers who were sitting around her. And what I learned was the only time she was getting attention was when she did something wrong. So she was doing things to get attention. Anything, she wanted the attention, even though it wasn't good attention. It was, she was being told no, she was being redirected, whatever, all these things were happening. She was getting attention, regardless whether it was from me or my teaching assistant. She was receiving attention, and that is what she wanted. That was her purpose. Her communication was reinforced. She got what she wanted, which was attention. Not good attention, not positive attention, but attention. And so what we had to do is me and my teaching assistant, we brainstormed, and I said, what I need you to do is give her attention through the whole thing positive. If she does something negative, ignore her. But talk to her through all the circle time. Just kind of whisper to her and tell her how good she's doing, and tell her what's happening, and tell her all of these wonderful things. Just talk to her and just laugh with her. And yeah, it's your turn. That's so fun. Yeah, it was their turn. And oh my gosh, Miss Katie did that thing again. I know, it's so funny. And they would just talk through the whole circle time. And her behavior went from over 20 down to like 2. And because she just needed that attention, and then we were able to phase out some of that over exaggerated positive attention. But when this particular student starts acting up or showing some undesirable behaviors, it's exactly what I do. I start paying attention to everything she does well, and paying attention to what everyone else in the class is doing well, or even my adults sometimes if I have to just really go kind of over the top and make stuff up. And you'll see when when I see her attention flare or her behaviors flare up and her attention seeking behaviors flare up, you'll suddenly see me start calling on everyone for what they're doing well. So even adults, I'll be like, oh, Miss So-and-so, I really like how you're sitting in your chair. And oh, wow, I love that nice voice you're using. I like the way you're talking to your friend over there. And thank you so much for picking up those dishes and washing the dishes for me. You're so fantastic. But I over exaggerate the wonderful things other people are doing. And as soon as I see her doing something I like, it could be something minimal. It could be sitting in her chair. I'm going to get, oh my gosh, I love how you're sitting in your chair today. And I'll go over there and say something to her. And I'm going to really pay attention to the good things, especially for those attention seekers. All our kids want to hear it, so they continue to want to do that behavior. But if you find out that your child is demonstrating attention seeking behavior, that strategy right there will it won't work right away because they'll have to figure it out, but it'll work, especially if you can ignore the negative ones. If you can ignore the undesirable behaviors and really just pay attention to the good things, no matter how small they are, with a lot of enthusiasm, you'll be in the money. You'll be heading in a good direction. Ignore attention-seeking negative behaviors when you can. So that's that one that I'm talking about. The ones that can be difficult to ignore is the head banging or gagging till you throw up, those types of things. But if you just go back to the strategy of beating them to the punch, anticipating when those things are going to happen, teach a replacement behavior, identifying what is acceptable for you as a replacement behavior, and respecting that communication. You have to be willing to respect it. And then go on from there. Using hand under hand to support their learning and involvement. And that is learning of skills and involvement. This one is really powerful as well. It's my go-to teaching strategy for all things with our children with visual impairments. A lot of our children, some of the behaviors that we see is that they're defensive, that they don't want to touch stuff, or they get upset when their hands are grabbed. And a lot of our kids just really don't like this. I had a student who didn't like when I worked from behind her. When we're working with young children with visual impairments, a lot of times we'll sit them in our lap and we'll work from behind and we'll show them things with our hands. Well, she didn't like it. She couldn't see me. She couldn't use the vision that she had to see me, so she would kind of look back at me, and then she would look back, but eventually she'd make her way down to my arm and she would bite me. And biting is an undesirable behavior for sure. But when I really looked back at what was happening, the antecedent was me. I was behind her. She didn't like it. So when I just changed that and I worked from beside or in front of her, we were much more successful. But the same thing happens with hand grabbing of students' hands. I hear a lot that a child is tactually defensive. But when I really watch closely, when they're pulling away, it's because somebody has grabbed their hand and they get mad and they pull away because they don't want to have you grabbing their hands. And we as adults are well-intentioned because we want to show them something. We know that they need to get their hands on things to learn because they're learning through their sense of touch, or they need to feel it to support what they're seeing visually. They need those things together. And so we try to bring their hands forward and we'll pull them to do that. But it takes all of their control away. And for some of our kids, that's really frustrating. There are definitely kids that don't care. They'll let you do whatever you want with their hands and their body, and they do not care. They are who I describe as go with the flow children. But there are some kids that are like, no, I want to do it on my own. And they get really frustrated. And so I encourage you as often as possible to take your hand underneath theirs and pull it forward and explore hand under hand. And sometimes they might pull back, but just stay in contact with their hand or their arm so they can feel you, and just keep doing it. And eventually they do. Even our kids who are more stiff with multiple impairments, they'll relax and join you, but you can come up and prompt them under their hand to come and look with you and use those words, look with me, let me show you. But try not to grab their hands as much as possible. And then that last bullet point was from your examples, but I ended up having to record this after the fact, so I don't have any of your specific examples to work from. My final thoughts from both segments is the struggle is real. When you're dealing with behaviors that are undesirable, it's not easy. It's not easy, and it can be very unpleasurable. So like I said originally, start small. Truly, truly, truly start small. and find something that's manageable. Talk to your family, talk to your students' educational team or early intervention team, and help pinpoint and brainstorm ideas. And hey, I think this is the purpose. I think this is the antecedent. I think this behavior. I think this is the consequence. What do you think? This is what I'm trying. And as long as you're working towards, you're not doing anything wrong. You can't mess up. Like there's already an undesirable behavior. It's not going to get worse. Just take your time and analyze it, and it'll come together. And also I wanted to add, and I wanted to remind, because I said this in the original session, is that some of our children, they take time to get through things. They need lots of opportunities to practice. So if you teach your child a desirable behavior one day, and they seem to be getting it, and the next day they forget, it's okay. Just keep teaching it, keep teaching it, keep teaching it, keep teaching it, because they're going to get it. They require opportunities to practice, and they need consistency over time. So remember that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was some of our children have a delayed reaction time, especially our children who have additional disabilities or some sensory needs. Sometimes their reaction to an antecedent is delayed. And you have to be aware of that and pay attention over time. I had a little guy, and I was doing an activity with him one day, and I thought he was finished. He was, I can't remember why I thought he was finished, but I thought he was finished and he didn't want it anymore. And I said, oh, you don't want to do this anymore? Okay. And so I took it away, and like 30 or so seconds later, he got really frustrated. And he was a kid that I had been told was really sensory and so forth, and he didn't like loud noises and things like that. And so I thought something had happened in the classroom, but I was like, I don't know. I think you were having fun, but he was hard to read. I didn't know him very well, and I didn't know, it was hard to tell whether he was and wasn't enjoying something. And I was like, would you like this back? I think we were playing with sand. And I was like, would you like the sand back? And he got quiet. And I was like, huh. So I put the sand back up there, and he jumped right back into play the way that he was previously, where I wasn't sure that he was actually enjoying or engaging. But I just remember thinking that, like, oh, we have to be aware of the fact that sometimes our students take time to process. So for this particular example, the antecedent for his behavior of getting agitated, and he did some self-stem or abuse type of behaviors to himself when he got agitated, was that I took away the sand, something he was enjoying. I ended an activity he was enjoying. So his behavior was undesirable, some self-injury type of behaviors, and then the consequence was that he could have hurt himself. But ultimately, I figured out what it was that he wanted. And so in the future, if I would have had a lot more time to work with him, I would have started working on a way for him to tell me when he was finished, or that he wanted more, and so forth. But yeah, it just drew awareness for me that he took time to process. And sometimes we'll misidentify the purpose or the antecedent because of the processing time. So be aware of that. So the struggle is real, and some of the challenges that we face when we're identifying and working on changing behaviors or finding new ways to communicate to obtain what it is that we want. Agendas, ours and those that serve our children. We all have things that we have to do, and the related service providers that work with our child, the speech therapists, occupational therapists, they come in during this small window. And I know I hear that a lot with families, and I've had to support families with outside therapists, and I've had to support my children in my classroom with the therapists that serve us, is that they have this small window of time, and they have these goals that they're supposed to be working on. They want to get it done, and the child's not always ready. And so then we see undesirable behaviors, and the whole experience isn't pleasant for anyone. So that's a challenge when you're addressing behaviors, and I'm aware of that. Just teaching desired behavior in the mix of a busy life or home. Like, there's so much going on, and now you're having to try and teach a new behavior. There's a lot. Time, I think this is a constant trend here, is time. Where do I fit this in? That's why you have to start small. Being consistent. It can be very challenging to be consistent. When you decide you're going to address a behavior, the best option is to choose something you can be consistent with, because if you are not consistent, your child doesn't know when it's expected and when it's not expected, the new behavior. And so it's important to be consistent, but that can be one of the challenges. It can be very difficult to be consistent, especially between other adults and so forth. But I have found that most children, if I expect one thing but a teaching assistant expects something different. Typically they adjust, and they know that with me, they have to operate this way, no matter what other additional disabilities they have. And that with my teaching assistant, maybe they're a little bit more lackadaisical and will allow some different things to happen. So keep that in mind if you do have multiple people helping you care for your child, that if you start to set a new expectation or you're teaching a new replacement behavior for something that's less desirable, consistency is important, but as long as you are consistent in that one activity, in that one routine that you've identified to start with, it's okay if not everyone is. Your child will figure it out. Getting others on board can be difficult. I know that when you do have children who are being cared for by more adults, others will be like, but they just really want the cookie. And you're like, but I really need them to eat their real food, you know, and they feel bad and they just want to give them what they want, can't handle seeing them cry, or they can't handle seeing some of these undesirable behaviors. So they just give them what they want. So that can be really difficult. And that was it. I hope that you are able to utilize some of these strategies. My email address is included with the PowerPoint presentation that you have access to. So go ahead and shoot me an email if you have questions. I am happy to help you brainstorm, but do look to your other professionals as you work through some of your child's undesirable behaviors. All right, that was all that I had for you today, and I will be doing a training here in a couple weeks on routines, and routines are one of the best ways to reduce some of your challenging behaviors. So watch out for that invite or the recording when it comes through. All right, have a great day. Thanks. Bye.